I was 15, the year I learned a mother's love could be bought. The price, a rich husband and a luxury vacation to Bali. I was the baggage. She was happy to leave behind at the airport with nothing but a couple of $100 bills and a lifetime of betrayal. This is the story of how my mother's ultimate betrayal became my greatest liberation. If you believe karma is real, make sure you're subscribed to see how it all unfolds. I can still conjure the exact smell of our old 2-bedroom apartment if I close my eyes and try hard enough. It wasn't just one scent, but a blend of a dozen small, comforting things. It was the faint, ever-present aroma of cinnamon from the cheap plug-in air freshener my mom always kept by the door. A scent, she said, made the place feel like a permanent hug. It was layered over the warm, sugary perfume of the oatmeal cookies she'd bake from a box mix on rainy Saturdays. Our living room, which also served as our dining room. It was decorated with paper chains we had painstakingly crafted together from construction paper, their vibrant reds and blues slowly fading to pastel in the single wide beam of sunlight that blessed our apartment each afternoon. I have a memory, sharp as a photograph, of being 7 years old, curled up in a pillow fort we'd built out of sofa cushions and a floral bedsheet. The rain was drumming a soft rhythm against the window pane. Mom was inside the fort with me, a flashlight held under her chin, making her face look goofy and monstrous in the dim light. She smelled like dough and vanilla extract. She poked my nose gently. "It's just you and me against the world. Quito," she had whispered, her smile so wide and real that it lit up her eyes more than the flashlight ever could. "And that's all we'll ever need. Promisey." That promise, that entire world, I feels like a story I read in a book about someone else's life. Because the air here, in Marcus's sprawling contemporary mansion, has no smell at all. It's a void. It's been so professionally, so silently scrubbed and polished by a housekeeping staff, I rarely see that it's achieved a level of sterility you'd find in a laboratory. The only consistent sounds are the whisper, quiet hum of the climate control system and the sharp, lonely echo of my own sneakers on the polished marble floors. Every footstep feels like an announcement of my own intrusion. I found my mom in the sunroom, a space walled with glass that was larger than our entire old apartment. She was elegantly draped over a bone-white chaise lounge, her thumb moving in a hypnotizing, rhythmic swipe across the screen of her new phone. The afternoon sun caught the facets of the diamond on her left hand, a stone so large it felt obscene, and it fractured the light into 100 tiny, frantic rainbows that danced on the stark white walls. I hovered in the doorway for a full minute, gathering the courage to break the pristine silence. "Mom." A soft, non-committal hum was her only reply. She didn't look up. Her focus was entirely captive to the small, glowing rectangle in her hand. I found a recipe online for those lemon bars you like. I thought maybe we could bake something, like we used to." The words came out softer than I intended, my own voice sounding alien and small in the cavernous room. She finally lifted her head. "A delicate." Barely their line of annoyance appeared between her perfectly sculpted eyebrows. "Oh, Lily? Honey. No. The kitchen staff handles all the food preparation. I don't even know if we have the right ingredients for that kind of thing." She paused, her gaze flicking over me with a quick, appraising glance. "Besides," she added, her attention already magnetically pulled back to the phone, "all that sugar and butter is just terrible for your complexion. You should be more careful." And just like that, the conversation was over. That was the new normal. Our past. The life she once swore was all we needed was now a collection of bad habits and unsophisticated tastes she was trying to erase. Living in that house was a masterclass in learning how to become invisible. My new stepfather, Marcus, was a man who communicated almost exclusively through polite, brief nods and smiles that never quite reached his eyes. He wasn't overtly unkind. He was something worse. He was profoundly indifferent. He looked at me. When he looked at me at all, the way one might glance at a decorative vase that came with the purchase of the house. You acknowledge its existence, but you feel no connection to it. No need to engage. His children, however, were a different story. The younger two, Caleb and Madison, had inherited their father's indifference and mostly treated me like thin air. But Tiffany, the oldest at 17, seemed to have taken my presence as a personal insult. She was a younger, sharper version of her father, all cool confidence and calculated expressions, but with a unique brand of casual cruelty that only a teenager who has never been told no can perfect. I learned the full extent of it about a month after we moved in. I was in my room, a space so large and sparsely furnished that it felt more like a hotel suite than a teenager's bedroom trying to unpack the last, most important box. It held the artifacts of my old life photo albums with their plastic pages sticking together, stacks of my childhood drawings, and a worn-out stuffed bear with one mismatched button for an eye. Tiffany appeared in the doorway. Leaning against the frame with practiced nonchalance, she was meticulously filing her already perfect nails, her expression a mask of supreme boredom. "Still unpacking your baggage," she drawled. The word baggage delivered with a slight, deliberate emphasis that made it clear she wasn't just talking about the cardboard box. The cloying scent of her designer perfume, something heavy and floral, invaded my space. It smelled like money and arrogance. My cheeks flushed hot with shame. I wanted to say something, to defend the small collection of memories she had so easily dismissed, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just slid the box under my bed with my foot and pretended I hadn't heard her. The bomb dropped, as they always seemed to, during dinner at the long, imposing mahogany table was a ritual of quiet tension. The five of them would carry on a conversation that was like a foreign language to me. A whirlwind of names and places I didn't know, gossip from the yacht club, fluctuations in the stock market, planning for a charity gala. I had learned to become a silent observer, focusing on the rhythmic, almost meditative clinking of my fork and knife against the heavy porcelain plate. "I've booked the flights," Marcus announced into the quiet, placing his crystal wine glass down on the table with a sound of finality. "We're leaving for Bali in 2 weeks. The private villa on the coast. 2 full weeks." The silence shattered. Tiffany and Madison let out synchronized squeals of delight. Caleb, for the first time all evening, actually looked up from his phone, a rare flicker of interest in his eyes. In the chaos, a tiny, fragile flower of hope began to bloom in my chest. A real family vacation. Maybe this was the opportunity I had been desperately waiting for. A chance to connect, to bridge the gap, to finally feel like I was a part of this family. I instinctively looked to my mom, hoping to catch her eye, to share a silent, excited smile. But her gaze was locked on Marcus, her eyes shining with a kind of breathless, star-struck adoration I hadn't seen in them since she first met him. "Oh, Marcus, darling, that's absolutely wonderful," she gushed, reaching across the vast expanse of the table to place her hand over his. "You are just too good to us." The following week was a flurry of activity that I was pointedly excluded from. My mom, in her new role as the perfect wife to a wealthy man, orchestrated a massive shopping trip for Tiffany and Madison. It was an all-day affair. A strategic assault on the high-end boutiques downtown to curate the perfect resort wear wardrobe. I found her in her walk-in closet that morning, surrounded by shopping bags. "Can I come with you guys?" I asked, trying to sound casual. I could probably use a new swimsuit. Mom turned from admiring a silk caftan she was holding up to the mirror. She gave me a strained, apologetic smile. "Oh, sweetie, I'd love that, but today is going to be absolutely manic. Tiffany needs my full attention to pick her outfits. You know how she is. It's a whole production." She walked over and patted my shoulder. "But we'll have our own special shopping day soon. Just you and me. I promise." The special day never happened. I spent that Saturday wandering through the silent, empty mansion, the quiet pressing in on me from all sides. The real, undeniable knot of dread began to form in my stomach exactly 1 week before our departure. I was heading to the kitchen late at night for a glass of water, tiptoeing to avoid making any noise. As I passed Marcus's home office, I heard my mother's voice, low and conspiratorial, coming from the slightly ajar door. It was a tone I'd never heard her use with me. It was stripped of all warmth, all pretense. It was cold, sharp, and brutally efficient. "You don't need to worry about a thing," she said. "Everything is handled. I've made all the necessary arrangements. There won't be any trouble." A chill traced its way down my spine. The way she said trouble sounded like she was talking about a pest to be exterminated. I pushed the door open a little wider, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. She saw me and her expression changed in an instant, the coldness vanishing, replaced by a bright, artificial smile. "Lily, what are you doing up?" "Sweetie." "Who were you talking to? What arrangements?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She laughed. A light, airy sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, you and your wild imagination. Just boring logistics for the trip. Honey, nothing for you to worry your pretty little head about. Now, off to bed." The morning we were scheduled to leave, the air in the house was thick with an electric, chaotic energy. Professional car service drivers were carrying mountains of matching leather luggage down the grand staircase. My own luggage, a single, small, navy blue carry-on I'd had since I was 10, sat by the door. Looking like an orphan, an odd sense of detachment washed over me. I felt like I was watching a movie of a family leaving for vacation. I was just an extra in the background. No one asked if I was excited. No one checked if I had my passport. But I pushed the feeling down. I was 15. And hope is a stubborn, foolish thing. I told myself that the bad feeling in my gut was just nerves. At O'Hare, the first-class check-in lounge was an oasis of calm amidst the airport's chaos. Marcus strode confidently to the counter, placing a neat stack of dark blue passports on the gleaming marble. I watched his hand. My eyes counted them instinctively. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My heart stopped. Then it started again, hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. 5 passeports, not 6. I watched, paralyzed, as the cheerful agent printed their boarding passes, the little machine whirring efficiently. "Here you are, Mr. Henderson, Tiffany, Caleb, Madison." She handed them over with a professional smile. My mom accepted hers, her gaze fixed firmly on the departures board behind the counter. She was deliberately not looking at me. I stood rooted to the spot, my carry-on's handle digging into my sweaty palm. The agent gave me a quick, questioning glance. a flicker of pity in her eyes, before turning to the next family in line. Finally, as if she could feel the weight of my stare, my mom turned. Her face was a carefully constructed mask of composure. She grabbed my upper arm, her manicured nails digging in slightly, and steered me away from the counter, towards a desolate corner by a large, dusty potted plant. "There's been a slight change of plans," she began, her voice a low, urgent whisper. She still wouldn't meet my eyes. Her gaze was fixed on a point on the wall just past my ear. You won't be coming to Bali with us." The world dissolved into a meaningless buzz. The polished airport floor seemed to sway beneath my feet. What I don't understand. Why the words were thick. Foreign objects in my dry mouth. "Marcus and I talked about it," she said, the words tumbling out in a rehearsed rush. "We feel it's really important for this trip to be just for our new family. For us to have some time to bond. With the kids." The insult was so profound, so complete, that it left me breathless. The kids, as if I was something else entirely. Then she delivered the final, fatal blow. She opened her ridiculously expensive handbag, fished out her wallet, and pulled out 2 crisp, perfect $100 bills. She pressed them into my limp hand. It wasn't a motherly gesture. It was a transaction, a severance package. "You're 15 now. Lily. You're practically an adult. You can take care of yourself. Just take an Uber home." And then she turned, with a finality that stole the air from my lungs. She turned her back on me, her shoulders straight, and walked away. She strode back to Marcus and his children, fell into step beside them, and didn't look back. Not once. I stood there, a statue in the middle of a flowing river of people, watching them disappear through the security gate. The $200 felt like acid in my palm. I don't know how long I sat on one of those cold, hard plastic chairs, watching planes take off and land. 1 hour 3, the world had gone numb. The airport's announcements were a meaningless drone. Then, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A low battery warning flashing on the screen. 5%. My thumb, acting on some primal instinct for survival, scrolled through my contacts. It stopped on a name at the very bottom of the list. A name I hadn't dared to contact in 3 years. A person my mother had methodically, convincingly erased from my life, swearing he wanted nothing to do with me. My finger, shaking almost uncontrollably, pressed the call button. It rang once, twice. My hope was fading with each ring. Then, the ringing stopped. A voice, deeper than I remembered, raspy with sleep and laced with immediate concern, came through the speaker. "Lily, is that you?" And for the first time in years, a single, desperate word escaped my lips. Dad, the single word. Dad. Hung in the dead air of the airport terminal, feeling fragile and foreign on my tongue. For a moment, the only response was a faint static on the line, a sound that seemed to stretch for an eternity. My heart hammered against my ribs. Affrontique. Desperate rhythm. Maybe he would hang up. Maybe Mom was right. Maybe he didn't want to hear from me. Then, his voice came through again. Closer this time, stripped of its sleepy rasp and now sharp with a raw, indéniable urgency. "Lily, oh my God. Is that you? Is everything okay?" The dam broke. A choked, guttural sob tore itself from my throat. A sound I hadn't even known was trapped inside me. The carefully constructed walls I had built around myself in the hours since my mother left me just crumbled. The story came out not in sentences, but in broken, jagged pieces, punctuated by gasps for air. She left me, I stammered, my voice cracking. At the airport. Everyone went to Bali. She gave me money and told me to take an Uber. The silence on the other end of the line was different this time. It wasn't empty. It was heavy, charged with a gathering storm of emotion I couldn't yet name. I could picture him, wherever he was, sitting bolt upright, his mind racing. What he finally said, his voice dangerously low, a controlled fire burning beneath the surface of each word. He didn't question me. He didn't ask if I was sure or if there had been a misunderstanding. He just believed me. Instantly. The simple act of being believed felt like the first solid ground I had stood on all day. Where are you? Lily, he asked, his tone shifting from shock to command. Tell me exactly where you are. Which airport, which terminal? I looked up, my vision blurred with tears. And read the signs. O'Hare. I'm in Terminal 3. Near Gate 02. The irony of the gate number was a fresh, bitter wound. Okay, he said. And I could hear the sounds of movement in the background. A rustling of clothes. The decisive click of a door. Listen to me very carefully. Lily, do not move from that spot. Don't talk to anyone. Don't go anywhere. I am coming to get you. Do you understand me? I am on my way. Before I could even process what that meant, he was gone. The line went dead. My phone screen flickered and died. Its last ounce of power expended. I was alone again. But this time, it was different. A tiny, terrified seed of hope had been planted in the barren wasteland of my despair. What followed was the longest wait of my life. Every passing minute felt like an hour. I watched families reunite with tearful hugs and travelers rush to their gates. A world of motion and purpose that I was no longer a part of. I clutched the $200 bills in my pocket. The paper now crinkled and damp from my sweaty palm. It was the only proof I had that the last few hours had been real. Just as a sliver of doubt began to creep back in, a man in a crisp, dark suit approached me. He was tall, with neat graying hair at his temples, and his expression was professional but kind. Lily Anderson, he asked, his voice calm and reassuring. I could only nod, my throat too tight to speak. My name is Arthur. Your father sent me. He said simply. He's waiting for you. Please. Come with me. He didn't lead me back towards the main entrance or the baggage claim. Instead, he guided me through a set of nondescript doors I'd never noticed before. Down a quiet, sterile hallway, and into a private lounge. From there, we walked out onto the tarmac itself. The roar of a nearby jet engine washed over me. A physical force. And there, parked a short distance away, was a sleek, white private jet. Its engines humming with a low, powerful thrum. The staircase was already down, and standing at the bottom, silhouetted against the bright lights of the airfield, was my father. He looked different than the faded photographs in my old albums. He was taller, his shoulders broader. The carefree smile from my memories was gone, replaced by an expression of intense, gut-wrenching concern. As I got closer, I could see the lines of worry etched around his eyes. He wasn't the failure my mother had described. He looked powerful, solid, real. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs, unsure of what to do. He closed the remaining distance in 2 long strides, and then his arms were around me, pulling me into a hug that was so strong and sure it felt like he was trying to piece my shattered world back together with his bare hands. He smelled of clean soap and coffee, a scent that was a universe away from Marcus's expensive, cloying cologne. I buried my face in his jacket, a thick, soft wool that absorbed the fresh wave of tears that came. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt safe. "I've got you," he whispered into my hair, his voice thick with emotion. "It's over now. I've got you." The inside of the jet was a world I didn't know existed. Cream-colored leather seats, polished wood paneling, a small galley stocked with drinks and snacks. It was quiet. The roar of the engines, a distant hum. We sat across from each other in silence for a while after takeoff, the lights of Chicago shrinking to a glittering tapestry below. Finally, he leaned forward and took a deep breath. "My daughter," he said, testing the words out. I haven't been able to say that in a long time. He then reached down and lifted a heavy leather briefcase onto his lap, snapping open the gold clasps with a sharp click. He pulled out a file. It wasn't just a file, it was a thick, meticulously organized binder with neatly labeled tabs. He placed it on the small table between us. "Your mother told me a lot of things over the years, Lily," he said, his voice level but filled with a deep, weary sadness. "She told me you were happy, that you had a new life, and that you didn't want to see me, that my letters and gifts just confused you. She said it was better for everyone if I just stayed away." He opened the binder. The first section was full of plastic sleeves, and inside each was a check. My eyes focused on the memo line child support, and stamped across the front of each one, in stark red ink, were words like "return to sender" or "refused." He flipped the page. It was a log of phone calls, dozens of them, with notes beside each one, no answer. Voicemail full. Number blocked. He turned the page again. This section contained printouts of emails, page after page of them, all sent to my mother. "How is Lily doing in school? Did she like the birthday present I sent? Can I please just talk to her for 5 minutes? Most had no reply. A few had curt, one-sentence responses. "She's fine. Please stop contacting us. You're upsetting her." The final section was the one that made my breath catch in my throat. It was filled with photographs of beautifully wrapped presents. Addressed to me. A telescope for my 10th birthday. A new laptop for my 12th. A delicate silver necklace for my 14th. She sent every single one back. He said softly, his gaze fixed on the binder. "Said you didn't want them, that you had everything you needed." I stared at the tangible proof of my mother's years-long deception. It wasn't just a betrayal that had happened today at the airport. It had been my entire life. My childhood had been a carefully constructed lie, designed to keep me isolated and him away. He wasn't a deadbeat dad who had abandoned me. He was a father who had been fighting to reach me, blocked at every turn by the one person I should have been able to trust. She told me you lost your job after the divorce," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "That you were struggling. That you moved away and started a new family and forgot about me." A humorless, bitter laugh escaped his lips. "I didn't lose my job, Lily. I founded a software company a year after I left. That company did very well." He gestured around the luxurious cabin of the jet. "Your mother knew. She knew every bit of it. I think she couldn't stand the idea of you knowing it, too." Something inside me shifted. The deep, aching sadness that had been my constant companion for years began to harden, to crystallize into something else. It was anger. A cold, clear, diamond-hard anger. The shame I had carried. The belief that I was unwanted. That I was baggage. It all evaporated in the face of this undeniable proof. I wasn't the problem. I had never been the problem. We landed in Seattle as the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple over the dark, steel blue water of the Puget Sound. A sleek black car was waiting for us on the tarmac. The drive was quiet. This part of the world was a different kind of wealthy than Marcus's sterile, gated community. The houses here were large and modern, but they were nestled among towering evergreen trees, feeling more like a part of the landscape than an imposition upon it. We pulled into a long driveway that wound through a small forest before opening up to a stunning house made of glass, dark wood, and stone, perched on a cliff overlooking the water. It was beautiful, but unlike Marcus's mansion, it felt like a home. Inside, he led me up a floating staircase to a hallway with a single door at the end. I always kept a room for you, he said, his voice suddenly a bit hesitant. I didn't know what you'd like. So I hope it's okay. He pushed the door open. The room was beautiful, with a huge window that looked out over the water. The bed was made with a simple white duvet, and the furniture was a warm, light-colored wood. But it wasn't the room that made me stop in my tracks. It was the shelves. Lining one entire wall were shelves. And on those shelves, neatly arranged, was every single gift from the photographs, the telescope, the laptop, still in its box, the necklace, resting in its velvet case. Dozens of presents. One for every birthday. Every Christmas I had spent believing he had forgotten me. Each one was still perfectly wrapped. A small tag attached, with my name written in his strong, clear handwriting. I walked over and gently touched one of the boxes. A brightly wrapped gift labeled Lily, Birthday Hassonion. He had been here. He had been present. In his own way. Through all of it. My father came to stand beside me, placing a warm, steady hand on my shoulder. The weight of it was grounding. An anchor in the storm of emotions that was raging inside me. Get some rest tonight, Lily, he said, his voice a low, determined rumble. You're safe now. And tomorrow, we call the lawyers. I slept that night in a way I hadn't slept in years. It wasn't just sleep, it was a complete surrender. A deep, dreamless plunge into a silence I didn't know my mind was capable of. The bed was comfortable. The room was quiet. But it was more than that. It was the bone-deep knowledge, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, that I was safe. That the door was locked against the world, and there was someone on the other side who was standing guard. When I woke, the morning sun was streaming through the massive window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air and casting long shadows from the stacks of unopened presents on the shelves. The grief and anger were still there, nestled deep in my chest, but they were no longer a chaotic Enderian, roaring fire. They had cooled into something solid, something heavy and focused, like a whetstone waiting for a blade. I found my dad in the kitchen, a space of stainless steel and warm wood that looked like it belonged in a magazine. He was standing by a professional-grade espresso machine, a steaming mug already waiting for me on the granite island. He was dressed not in a suit, but in a simple gray t-shirt and jeans. He looked less like a CEO and more like a dad. Morning, he said, His smile, small but genuine. I figured you might need this. We didn't talk much at first. We just sat there, sipping our drinks. The quiet between us comfortable, not strained. It was a language of its own. A silent acknowledgement of the monumental shift that had occurred in the last 12 hours. After a while, he pushed a notepad and pen across the island towards me. Her name is Eleanor Vance, he said, his voice now crisp and businesslike. The CEO peeking through. She's the best family law attorney in the state. Her office is expecting us at 10. The drive into downtown Seattle was a blur of green trees giving way to towering glass buildings. Ms. Vance's office was on the top floor of a skyscraper that seemed to pierce the clouds. The view from the waiting room was breathtaking. The entire city spread out below us like a map. The waters of the Puget Sound glittering in the morning light. It felt symbolic, like we were looking down on all the problems that had seemed so insurmountable just yesterday. Eleanor Vance was not what I expected. She wasn't a shark in a pinstripe suit. She was a woman in her late 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes, a warm, reassuring smile, and an air of calm, unshakable competence. She shook my hand first, her grip firm, and looked directly at me. Not at my father. Lily, it's a pleasure to meet you, she said, her voice clear and kind. I'm very sorry for the circumstances that brought you here. In her office, which was filled with books and plants instead of intimidating legal plaques, my dad laid the thick binder on her polished mahogany desk. He didn't say much. He just opened it and turned it for her to see. Eleanor listened, completely silent. As I recounted the story, I started with the awkward dinners, the baggage comment, and ended with the $200 bills at gate 24. I told it factually, my voice steady, the cold anger inside me acting as a kind of armor. When I finished, she slowly, methodically, began to turn the pages of the binder. She examined the returned checks, read the unanswered emails, and studied the photographs of the presents. Her warm expression slowly hardened into one of professional steel. She closed the binder with a soft, final thud. She looked from my dad to me, her eyes missing nothing. David. Lily, she said, her voice leaving no room for doubt. Let's be perfectly clear. What we are about to engage in is not a custody battle. She leaned forward, her gaze intense. This is a rescue operation. And based on this evidence, she tapped the binder with a perfectly manicured nail, and the act of felony child abandonment committed at O'Hare Airport. It's one we are going to win. That afternoon, she filed an emergency motion with the family court. It was a stack of papers that legally, formally, laid out my mother's cruelty. Eleanor explained that it requested immediate, temporary sole custody for my father, pending a full hearing. Given the circumstances, she said, her tone confident, I expect a judge to sign it by the end of the day. She was right. The call came late that afternoon. The order had been signed. Legally. For the moment, my mother had no claim on me. I was free. The relief was so immense, so physical, that I had to sit down, my legs suddenly feeling weak. It was the first battle, and we had won. The next 2 weeks were a strange, surreal dream. I began seeing a therapist, a kind woman Eleanor had recommended, who helped me start to untangle the complicated knot of guilt and shame my mother had so expertly tied around my heart. In between those sessions, my dad and I fell into a new, easy rhythm. We explored Seattle. walking along the waterfront and eating fish and chips from a paper cone. He showed me his office. A bustling, creative space full of brilliant people, where he was clearly respected and admired. He taught me how to make a perfect omelet in his ridiculously high-tech kitchen, and we opened the presents. One by one, we sat on the floor of my new room and unwrapped the gifts from my lost childhood. We assembled the telescope and set it up on the balcony overlooking the water. We booted up the laptop. I put on the silver necklace, a delicate chain cool against my skin. With each unwrapped gift, it felt like we were reclaiming a piece of the past that had been stolen from us. Then, one evening, as we were planning for the upcoming court date, Eleanor called. She had news. My mom, Marcus, and the kids were due to fly back from Bali in 2 days. We need to have her served with the court order and the summons for the hearing, Eleanor explained. We could have a process server meet her at the airport. But that could get messy. Public. It would give her an opportunity to create a scene, to play the victim. So what do you suggest? My dad asked. A more elegant approach, Eleanor replied, and I could almost hear the smile in her voice. She'll be feeling relaxed, triumphant. Returning from her perfect family vacation, let's have our welcome home party wait for her at the house. It will be quiet, private, and infinitely more effective. The day they were due to arrive was the longest day of my life. I spent the afternoon with my dad in Eleanor's conference room. The stunning view outside completely lost on me. My stomach was a tight, churning knot of anxiety and anticipation. Eleanor had arranged for a private process server, a discreet professional, to be waiting just outside the gates of Marcus's community. As the hours ticked by, I kept picturing them. I imagined them on the plane, laughing about some inside joke from their trip, their skin tan, their minds full of memories of white sand beaches and turquoise water. I pictured them landing, breezing through customs, completely oblivious to the fact that the world they had left behind no longer existed. Then, Eleanor's phone buzzed. It was the process server. They're on the move, she announced, her voice calm. The town car just left the airport. The final wait was agonizing. Eleanor made small talk, but I could barely follow. My focus was entirely on the silent phone sitting in the middle of the conference table. Then, it buzzed again. A text message. Eleanor read it aloud. Package delivered. The trap had been sprung. The call came less than 10 minutes later. My dad's phone vibrated against the table, the screen flashing with a name I hadn't seen in 2 weeks. Mom. Eleanor nodded at me. Remember what we discussed. Lily. Be calm. Be brief. Let her do the talking. My dad answered and hit the speakerphone button. The first sound wasn't a voice, but a strangled, furious screech. David, what is this? What have you done? Hello? Sharon. My dad said, his voice as calm and steady as a rock. I think you know what this is. You've been served. Served? What are you talking about? Some man just handed me these lies. You can't do this. You can't take my daughter from me. Her voice was shrill, hysterical, laced with a disbelief that was quickly curdling into panic. Your daughter, my dad repeated, his voice dropping an octave, the controlled calm giving way to a dangerous edge. Is that what you call the child you abandoned in an airport terminal? There was a moment of sputtering silence on the other end. Then her attention shifted. Lily, are you there, Lily? You need to tell your father to stop this nonsense right now. You tell him what a liar he is. Tell him about all the things I've done for you. All the sacrifices I've made. This was it. My moment. The years of being silenced, of being told my feelings didn't matter, of being made to feel small and insignificant, all coalesced into a single point of cold, hard clarity. I leaned towards the phone. What exactly did you sacrifice at gate 24? Mom, I asked. My voice even, devoid of the tears she was expecting. It was quiet, calm, and utterly devastating. You should talk to my dad's lawyer. And then, before she could respond, before she could unleash the torrent of guilt and manipulation that I knew was coming, I reached out and ended the call. The silence that filled the room was absolute. My dad looked at me, his eyes shining with a fierce, protective pride. Eleanor gave me a slow, approving nod. It wasn't over yet. But in that moment, for the first time, I felt like the person who was in control of my own story. The final, satisfying crack in my mother's gilded cage came less than an hour later. Eleanor's phone rang. She answered, listened for a moment, and a small, wry smile touched her lips. She hung up and looked at us. Well, she said, looking immensely pleased. That was interesting. It seems Mr. Marcus Henderson has some concerns about how this situation might affect his public image. She paused for dramatic effect. That was his lawyer. He wants to know what his options are for a swift and quiet resolution. The weeks leading up to the final court hearing were a masterclass in watching a gilded empire crumble from within. Eleanor's prediction was correct. The call from Marcus Henderson's lawyer was the first tremor of a seismic shift. Marcus, ever the pragmatist, had no interest in being publicly associated with a woman accused of child abandonment. His brand was built on an image of flawless success and perfect family values. My mother had suddenly become a liability he was unwilling to carry. There were offers. Negotiations happened in quiet. Sterile offices between lawyers. Marcus, through his legal team, offered to not contest the custody transfer, to provide a sworn statement about the events leading up to the Bali trip, and even to cover certain legal fees. In exchange, he wanted his name kept out of the mud. A clean break. My mother, in her desperation, fought it. She sent my dad a barrage of texts and voicemails, alternating between tearful pleas, hollow apologies, and venomous accusations. He never responded, forwarding every message directly to Eleanor. Each message was just another nail my mother was hammering into her own coffin. The morning of the hearing, the sky over Seattle was a crisp, brilliant blue. I stood in front of the mirror in my new room, adjusting the collar of the simple, dark blue dress my dad had helped me pick out. I didn't look like the same girl who had stood, lost and broken, in the middle of O'Hare Airport. My face had more color. My eyes, which for years had been clouded with a kind of persistent, low-grade sadness, were clear and steady. The fear was gone, replaced by a quiet, unshakable resolve. My dad stood in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He was wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, and he looked every inch the powerful, protective father he was. He didn't offer words of encouragement or ask if I was ready. He didn't need to. He just met my eyes in the mirror and gave me a single, solid nod. We were in this together. The courtroom was smaller and more intimidating than I had imagined. The walls were paneled with dark, imposing wood, and the air was thick with a heavy, formal silence. We sat at one of the long tables, my dad, and Eleanor, who looked completely at ease, her files arranged in a neat, orderly stack before her. Then, I saw my mother. She was sitting at the opposite table, and the sight of her sent a jolt. Not of fear, but of a distant, clinical pity. Through me. She looked diminished. The expensive designer suit she wore hung on her slightly, as if it belonged to someone else. Her perfectly coiffed hair couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes or the frantic, hunted look in them. And she was alone. Marcus was not beside her. His children were not there to offer support. She had only a harried-looking, middle-aged lawyer who kept shuffling his papers nervously. She had made her choice at gate 24. And this was the consequence: she had her new family's riches, but not their loyalty. When my name was called, I walked to the witness stand, my footsteps echoing softly in the silent room. Eleanor's voice was calm as she guided me through my testimony. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just told the truth. I spoke about the chilly atmosphere in Marcus's house. I spoke of the dismissive comments, of being called baggage. I spoke of the shopping trips I was never invited on, and the overheard conversation in the hallway. And then, I spoke about the airport. I described the 5 passports. I described my mother's rehearsed, empty excuses. I described the $200 bills she pressed into my hand. And what did you do after she gave you the money? Lily Eleanor asked gently. I took a deep breath and, for the first time, I looked directly at my mother. Her face was pale. Her hands clenched into fists on the table. I watched her turn her back on me. I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying through the quiet courtroom. I watched her walk through gate 24 with her new family. She never looked back. My testimony was over. As I walked back to my seat, my dad's hand found mine under the table, his grip strong and grounding. Then, it was Eleanor's turn to present our case. It was a methodical, brutal, and brilliant dismantling of every lie my mother had ever told. She started with the binder. She had the court clerk place the returned child support checks, one by one, onto a projector for the judge to see. The red refused stamp on each one like a bloody wound. She read aloud the emails my dad had sent. His disparity. Polite pleas to have just a moment of contact with his daughter. She displayed the photos of the returned gifts. My mother's lawyer weakly objected, claiming his client had been struggling financially, a single mother doing her best. This was the moment Eleanor had been waiting for. Your Honor, she said, her voice dripping with controlled indignation. The petitioner's claim of financial hardship is not only a falsehood, it is a deeply cynical manipulation of this court. She then produced a new set of documents. They were credit card statements. Marcus's credit card statements, willingly provided by his legal team. Eleanor read from them, her voice ringing with damning clarity. In the 6 months leading up to the Bali trip, the very same period Ms. Miller claims she was struggling. She spent over $50,000 on, let's see, clothing from Chanel and Prada, handbags from Gucci, regular appointments at a high-end salon and spa, and dinners at restaurants where the tasting menu costs more than a month's rent in her old apartment. A collective, quiet gasp went through the small public gallery. The judge, a stern-faced woman with intelligent eyes, looked at my mother over the top of her spectacles, her expression turning from professional neutrality to undisguised contempt. That was when my mother finally broke. The mask of the wronged victim shattered into a million pieces. She's lying, my mother shrieked, jumping to her feet. Her voice a raw, ugly sound that clawed at the dignified silence of the room. Her lawyer tried to restrain her, but she shook him off. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "You did this, you ungrateful little brat. After everything I sacrificed for you, I gave you a beautiful home, I gave you everything." The judge's gavel came down with a crack like a gunshot. "That is enough. Ms. Miller, sit down. Or I will have you removed for contempt of court." But it was too late. Everyone in the room had seen her for exactly who she was, a desperate, selfish woman who saw her own child, not as a daughter to be loved, but as a sacrifice to be made on the altar of her own ambition. The verdict, when it came, it felt less like a legal ruling and more like the restoration of a natural order. The judge granted my father full and sole legal and physical custody, but she didn't stop there. She looked directly at my mother, her voice cold with fury. "Ms. Miller," the judge said, each word landing like a hammer blow. "In my 15 years on this bench, I have rarely witnessed an act of parental selfishness so calculated, so callous, and so profoundly damaging. You did not just abandon your daughter, you systematically attempted to erase her father from her life for your own financial and social gain. This court considers your actions to be unconscionable." The final, sharp crack of the gavel echoed in the room. It was over. A breath I felt like I had been holding for 8 years left my body in a long, shuddering sigh. I turned to my dad, and his arms were there to wrap around me. It wasn't a hug of victory, but one of profound, quiet relief. The war was over. We had survived. As we walked out of the courthouse, the bright Seattle sun felt warmer than it ever had before. A few weeks later, the final piece of karmic justice clicked into place. Eleanor called. Marcus Henderson had filed for divorce from my mother, citing fraud and reputational damages. The ironclad prenuptial agreement she had so eagerly signed left her with almost nothing. She lost the mansion. She lost the status. She lost the credit cards. She lost the man for whom she had sold her own child. Today, my life is quiet, and it is my own. I am enrolled in a new school. I have friends. I have a father who listens to me, who laughs with me, and who is teaching me what unconditional love actually feels like. Sometimes, my dad and I will take a walk down by the waterfront, watching the ferries glide across the water as the sun sets behind the Olympic Mountains. The anger is gone now, replaced by a deep and abiding peace. My mother tried to end my story at gate 24, to write me out of her glamorous new life. But what she saw as an ending was really a beginning. She didn't close a door on me that day. She simply checked her own baggage, freeing me to board a different flight entirely, one that finally took me home.